Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm Suzanne Monroe, founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals, where I've been teaching people how to live a life of wellness, tap into their passion, and go for their dreams for over 15 years. I believe living well and dreaming big starts with ourselves. This podcast will show you how to create a healthy, holistic life, empower your mindset, follow your dreams, and make a big impact. Let's dive in right now. Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. In today's episode, we're talking about mindfulness. Mindfulness is kind of a buzzword these days. So we're going to break it down for you, and we're going to talk about if it's even realistic to be mindful when there's so much going on in our world today. You're about to find out because in today's episode, I'm talking with a special guest, Dawn Mauricio, who has been practicing insight meditation since 2005. And she just published a book called Mindfulness Meditation. It's been on my nightstand for the last month, and I am loving it. Mindfulness Meditation for Beginners by Dawn Mauricio. And during our episode today, we're going to dive into how mindfulness can help you, even if you're someone who thinks your mind is just too busy and it won't work for you. Plus, Dawn's going to lead us on a powerful mindfulness practice during the episode, which I think you're really going to love. So let's get started. Welcome to today's episode, Mindfulness Meditation, a necessary tool in your wellness toolkit. You know, mindfulness is a buzzword these days, but how do you actually achieve it? Today, we're going to talk about just that and how to incorporate mindfulness into your wellness practice, and also what challenges it can actually help you with. And I'll probably share some of my own struggles with mindfulness along the way as we go. I'm super excited because we have a special guest with us today, Dawn Mauricio. Dawn has been practicing and studying insight meditation since 2005, and she has graduated from the first teacher development group of True North Insight and Spirit Rocks Mindfulness Yoga and Meditation Training, dedicated practitioners program, and a 4-year retreat teacher training. She is known to teach with a playful, dynamic, heartfelt approach and leads day-longs, retreats, year-long programs, and mindfulness workshops in Canada and US for Spirit Rock, True North Insight, and for teens with Inward Bound Mindfulness Education. Dawn's website is dawnmauricio.com. We'll put that in the show notes. And Dawn is also the author of a brand new book called Mindfulness Meditation for Beginners. I have my copy right here with me today. Super excited. As you can see, for those of you who are on video, it's got lots of Post-it notes. Welcome, Dawn, to the call.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited you're here with us and joining us today. This is going to be, I think, a very fun conversation. And there really couldn't be a better time to be talking with you about mindfulness. You know, many people feel like the world and maybe their own lives are spinning a little bit out of control. So having you here today feels like a soothing balm, really, to help us move through, hopefully with just a little more ease.
Yeah. When we booked this call months ago, I had no idea what day it would fall on, the first Tuesday of November. And it feels really poignant. I feel, especially if folks are mostly from the US and it could be from elsewhere. I'm from Canada, for example, but I just think that the ripple effects of so many things happening in the world is really felt so deeply. And it really just points towards our interconnection and interdependence. So I'm thinking of all of the Canadian neighbors to the south, the US. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for being here. You know, before we get started, I'd love to just hear a little bit about your story and your own journey to mindfulness. Like, what brought you to this point?
Oh my gosh. So it kind of happened haphazardly, I feel. I was backpacking through Southeast Asia, and it was one of my first trips alone. And at the beginning of that trip, I was so homesick, and I would spend a lot of my days crying, even though I was traveling through beautiful places like Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, the Philippines, etc. But my mind was not where I was. It was totally anchored at home and just what I could have been missing, etc. And so I would spend a lot of my days crying, including on like buses and things like that. And one day I had met this person who was also crying, but for a different reason. And then when I ran into her a few days later, she seemed so fine. And I was like, oh my God, like I want to be like you. I don't want to suffer right now. Like, I'm just so heartbroken. What worked for you? And she would say, oh, Vipassana. And I was like, what the heck is that? And then I was actually in South Asia for a total of 4 months, but I just started getting to see a lot of monks and whatnot. And then I would meet more and more people who practiced Vipassana meditation. And so they would go on monasteries for these retreats. And then finally, there was a day where I think I picked up a magazine that was just laying by a pool. And when I got into the pool, the first person I talked to just came out of a retreat. And in that magazine, there's also an article about Vipassana meditation. And I was like, okay, universe, I hear you. And so then that person that I met in the pool, I said, who's your teacher? Where did you go? And that was in 2005. And then a few days later, I was on that monastery. And it was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life till now, because of the intensity that some of these retreats can bring. And so every day I plotted my escape, but they had my passport at reception, so I couldn't leave. But there was a part of me that knew, despite its unpleasantness, that it was also transformative. And I knew to some degree that it would be part of my life. And I just didn't realize to what extent, like, it's all I do now, basically. So, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. There's those moments, like one moment in time, and it kind of changes everything. And it sounds like that's kind of what happened to you.
Yeah, or it's kind of like the universe was hitting me over the head with a few of those moments in time until I actually listened. So.
You're like, all right, there's nothing else to do but listen now.
Exactly.
I love that story. Thanks for sharing that. So before we get too far along, let's just let's get clear on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
What is mindfulness meditation exactly?
Yeah. And so I would even add to that question, what is Vipassana meditation? Because I already also mentioned that. So mindfulness meditation, as you said in the intro, has become this buzzword. And it really refers to these techniques that are rooted in Buddhist meditation. And the techniques really point towards us bringing a quality of awareness to whatever it is we're doing in the moment. And that quality of awareness of the present moment is non-judgmental and is kind. And then those techniques have the roots in Buddhist meditation, and the style of Buddhist meditation that I practice that most closely resembles mindfulness meditation, so I like to say that they're like cousins, is insight meditation. In insight meditation, the Pali word, and Pali is the language in which the teachings of the Buddha were written. The Pali word for insight meditation is Vipassana. And so just to kind of place all those words in your mental maps kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I got to say, prior to reading your book, I guess I was confused, even though I've taken meditation and mindfulness classes and had my own practice. I was a little bit confused between the words of there's mindfulness, there's meditation, and then there's mindfulness meditation. And it's probably me just overthinking it, right? But I love in your book how you explain that meditation is just this intentional practice of staying aware of the present moment. And it's sort of this doorway to mindfulness. Am I getting this?
Yeah, exactly. So mindfulness is that quality of awareness that's like quite encompassing and global. Meditation are the techniques that help us cultivate this mindfulness so that it's accessible in the moments when we least expect it. For example, if our parking spot got taken at the grocery store or something like that, and we want to get angry, well, the formal practice of mindfulness has helped us kind of feel into the sensations of, say, anger arising, so that we might not lose it on the person who stole our parking spot. Might is the key word there. But
okay. I like that example. I think it points to the fact of doing the practice, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But, there's so many practices and tools and systems and things we can do to live a life of wellness, right? And so I think it can actually be overwhelming sometimes to feel like you're doing everything you need to do to be well and live a healthy life. And I know some listeners might be thinking, okay, mindfulness meditation, another thing I got to do to add to my to-do list. Yeah. Why do you think mindfulness meditation is this necessary tool in the wellness toolkit?
Yeah, that's a great question because I've certainly had those moments where it felt like another chore. And I think what would happen is because it's such a buzzword now and a lot of people know how helpful this practice can be, then we tend to place it on a pedestal or we overemphasize its importance. I think it's certainly powerful as a practice, but it's also simple. And so we tend to overlook the simplicity as a result. And so I think it's a necessary tool in the wellness toolkit because it could be applied to whatever it is we're doing. We don't also have to change our belief system. We don't even have to change what we're doing in order to be able to apply this quality of awareness. And so in a lot of ways, I like to think that this could be a really supportive undercurrent to whatever it is we're doing. And then it helps us move out of any goals, which I think as a society we're really fixated on because it does provide us with a direction. So it's definitely helpful to have goals, but we don't really have the necessary tools for when we fall off the wagon from moving towards our goal. And so I find mindfulness, with it being the undercurrent, it really addresses the how. Like, how are we moving in life? How are we trying to achieve our goals? It also helps us kind of like get back up, dust ourselves off more quickly. And so I find as a result, it's just this really useful companion. I mean, I'm totally biased, but I want to say in whatever it is we do in life.
I just love that word, undercurrent. Like that kind of says it all, right? In a way, it is another tool, but I love how you said undercurrent because it's sort of like this container for all the other things that you might be doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and I'll say I've been practicing meditation myself for at least 10 years. And I remember when I first got started, it seemed, I mean, really difficult. I'd be sitting there going like, what am I doing sitting here? And I'll be the first to admit, even today in my practice, it comes and goes, right? Sometimes it feels like right on and I'm in the flow. Other times I'm not sure if it's working. Why does meditation and mindfulness seem so hard at first for people who are just getting started? Or even further down the road.
Yeah, exactly. I love that you added that piece because I think a misconception is that it is an easy thing to do. It's simple, as I said, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. And I think also because just like language and words, it's very linear. So when we describe this path of practice, we tend to might also think that we improve in a linear way. I also think that when we learn about meditation and we hear about the benefits, we don't really hear about the ways that we might take one step forward, two steps back, a step to the side, a step forward again, that it's, again, really not linear. And so I think sometimes what gets in the way of us having a regular access to this practice is the expectations we place on it or on our own practice. So like I said, it's really not linear and it could actually feel very messy. But if we return to the definition of mindfulness, which is this quality of awareness that we bring to whatever is happening in the present moment, then our meditation practice is not dependent on it being tranquil or calm. The mind could be totally agitated, but if we're able to know that the mind is agitated, then there's a certain steadiness of the heart and mind there. And that in and of itself is developing a certain resilience in our practice. And so all that to say is I just think we tend to have these expectations that, okay, well, I've been practicing this long and these many minutes. Google says I have these benefits. Why don't I notice them, et cetera, et cetera. And
Right.
another thing actually about these benefits, once we are well read about it, is that we tend to look for the benefits, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But what happens is sometimes when we're so with the image that's coming to mind right now, it's like looking down a microscope. So we're looking like, well, did my sleep improve? How's my blood pressure? Or how's my, if we're kind of like looking for specific benefits, then we're also missing out on all of the other ways that mindfulness is benefiting us that we might not recognize in our daily life.
We can't help ourselves, right? We're so goal oriented with everything else we do in life, but it's kind of a relief. Like, okay, I don't have to be goal oriented as much when it comes to mindfulness. It kind of just, it is.
Exactly. Yeah. And to trust that. And for me, it took me a long time to trust it because pretty much everything in life from what I've learned or have been conditioned to believe, does improve in this linear way. Like even yoga practice, it's like if I'm on my yoga mat X times a week, well then then yeah, I'll see my body increase in flexibility. Or if I have an exam to study for, the more time I spend preparing, the better I'll do. And yet mindfulness meditation is the only thing so far that I've really come across that it could be completely the opposite of what I think looks like improvement, but it's actually working.
Okay, so that's interesting. So there may be these like ebbs and flows, and improvement looks totally different than anything else in our life. So we get that.
Yeah.
But is there a certain amount of time that it takes to actually sort of get into a practice that at least is working for you in some way? Or is this just a lifelong journey of you never know?
The short answer is yes to both of those questions. It's like, yes, it's a lifelong journey. And yes, there are traces of it working from pretty early on, actually. But the ebbs and flows is really just what tends to kind of plant seeds of doubt in our mind, I think. And so some of the immediate benefits, I would say, really just are more personal in terms of like, they might not be these grandiose physiological benefits necessarily, but just kind of like, for me at least, when I practice even just a few minutes a day, when I am getting impatient, so patience is not an easy one for me. So when I'm impatient throughout the day, I'm at least able to trace back moments of patience to just the beginning of my day. And then it kind of gets sprinkled out as whether it's a memory or something that I can actually draw from throughout the day. There's something also about just in our capitalist society, how we're so driven and we are taught to believe that our productivity is directly linked to our self-worth. And yet when we pause and quote unquote do nothing in meditation, there's so much that can come from that place too. And so that is another way that I feel that benefit of just kind of like untangling that conditioning around productivity. But also, ironically or paradoxically, a lot of times when I have like something like a problem to solve and I just can't figure it out, a lot of times the answer, even though I'm not trying to look for it, comes up in meditation because I'm giving it a lot more space. And in that space, there's room for a new perspective to arise, something that wouldn't have come up if I just continued thinking really hard about it. So those are like some immediate benefits, more like medium. And so I'm not talking about any of the physiological benefits, but like medium ones can include something like this deepening of trust, this connection of like intuition as well. So kind of like trusting our gut, because actually the body is talking to us in different ways all the time, including through the gut. And so when we can strengthen that connection, then we could make decisions from there or speak from that place. And I would say like a long-term benefit, it's, yeah, someone might be able to stay still and quiet their mind, and that could be good. But for me, the most useful benefit that I've experienced is an increase in kindness to myself and others. Because for anyone who's tried meditation, the mind wanders incessantly. And that's what it does. So I think one of the misunderstandings of practice is that the mind kind of goes blank. But for anyone who's tried earnestly to do that, that doesn't happen. And so in that constant wandering, at some point we can, at least for me, for the first few years, I would be like, get back here, mind. And I would be quite rough or harsh with myself. After a few years, I was like, okay, fine, mind, you're going to do what you're going to do. And then from there, this kindness got cultivated. And that now gets transferred out into my life for when I might not have the practice that I want, when things don't go my way in my life. There's this kindness that arises towards me that wants it to be different, or towards the people that I think could do better or something like that.
I love what you said, this kindness toward yourself, right? We're always thinking of like, what are the benefits? And that's maybe not something that we would think about, but it's powerful, right? And it's like a shift in how, it sounds like a shift in how you actually like treat yourself and how you kind of show up in the world. So I love that. I want to share, you share in your book this quote, which I loved. It was from an unknown source. It says, there are only two mistakes one can make along the road to truth, not going all the way and not starting. And I love that because it's perfect when it relates to this whole topic about deciding to get started with a mindfulness practice, right? It's like, those are kind of the options. And I thought that was a great quote.
Yeah, and I would even challenge listeners here in the Zoom room, but also on the podcast later, to think of the fact that you're listening, the fact that you think of mindfulness meditation. I feel like that's already the beginning of your path, that the seeds have been planted, and you can ignore the seeds or the signs. But at least for me, my experience has been that it's always kind of come up again and again and again. And so, yeah, to maybe turn towards it and see for yourself and get curious about this practice.
And if we've got any doubters out there still, you're hearing the benefits, right? So there's these bigger benefits. But I know, as you talk about in your book, that mindfulness can also help with literally specific challenges as we talk about wellness. Let's talk a little bit about that. What challenges can mindfulness actually support us with when we think about our health and our life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think the most obvious ones include, say, sleep and stress and anxiety. When I teach mindfulness groups, often I ask folks like, why did you sign up? Why are you here? And so those are the most common reasons why, whether it's from their own volition, their doctors, or like their partners who told them to take the class or something like that. And so what mindfulness does, it helps us to not take our thoughts so literally. We can see them as these passing phenomena, and that we don't necessarily need to believe in. And so in that, there's what's sometimes called like this, or how I paraphrase it as like this security guard, where mindfulness now is just like, hold up, there's this thought. Remember, we don't have to believe in it. And then from there, in that brief pause, which could only be a couple, I don't know, seconds even, there's this pausing before reacting. So then from there, we can choose our response instead of kind of getting lost in our reaction. Anxiety, it could also, in a lot of ways, in relation to or related to stress, it can help with this detachment from the story. I think a lot of times we can over-identify with a certain anxiety, like, it needs to be done this way at this time. And then from there, we, whether it's self-imposed or externally imposed, we put this pressure on ourselves. But what mindfulness can do is kind of get us to stop and be like, wait, is this true? And then for sleep, just because I think stress anxiety really impacts our sleep, the idea that or actually they sometimes sleep and mindfulness are used relaxation and mindfulness are used interchangeably as if they're the same thing, but they're not. And there's a small nuance. Mindfulness is this anchoring of the mind and the slowing down, and then that helps us to relax. And yet when we are relaxed, then mindfulness, this quality of awareness, can arise more naturally. And so both of those things, especially if we can apply it, say, like right before bed, can really help us kind of disconnect from the day, drop into the body, and then start relaxing the body. And then maybe a fourth reason that I see most often when people come to mindfulness is to explore or transform the relationship to pain. A lot of us have pain that we actually don't realize until we get still. Or some of us have chronic pain where it's actually screaming at us quite loudly. And so what mindfulness does is it helps us kind of get to the root of this idea or this concept of pain, because a lot of times we're like, ooh, that's painful, and then we resist. But then when we resist, actually, we increase suffering. So there's sometimes this playful and really simplistic formula. Pain is inevitable. We will feel pain in our lives. But when we resist the pain, then we're actually causing ourselves suffering. And so mindfulness helps us kind of see the resistance to it And how? Well, by actually dropping into the body and into the pain, which seems paradoxical or counterproductive or intuitive. But it's like, instead of just accepting this label of pain, it's like, well, what is pain like right now? Oh, it's tingly, it's hot, it moves, it actually gets more intense, less intense. And so when we can apply this curiosity even to something like pain, then it actually makes it weaker. So in a lot of ways, towards things that are painful or unpleasant, mindfulness is kind of like the antidote. It makes it weaker when resistance makes it stronger. So that's one of my favorite things, actually, how it helps change our relationship to pain. And once we're able to do that with, say, physical pain, then that also gets transferred out into like emotional pain too. At least that's been my experience. So, yeah.
Like you said, it's counterintuitive, right? We want to run away from the pain, or we want to run away from the emotional pain. And what you're saying is you're going into it, but when you resist it, it's actually growing bigger. But, like you said, counterintuitive, you don't think of it. So it can help with so many things. But even if you're not experiencing any of these things in your life, there's just so much to gain in your daily life, as you were talking about. One of the things I love about your book, Dawn, is how you share 50 meditation practices that people can do. And they're all just so simple and short and doable. Like I did one right before coming on today. I think it's called Tend Your Talk, which that'd be perfect for today, where you say that all forms of speech, whether written, spoken, or inner, they leave an imprint. What we say matters, right? And so this meditation was really about becoming mindful when talking with others. And now I'm supposed to be mindful now during the call. And I'm trying to do the one where you focus on your feet touching the ground. But I've noticed until I've mentioned that I did this, I had forgotten about it. But now I get to kind of come back to it again. So that was I love that. There was also a great one that I've been doing kind of right before bed to get into that restful place. And I just feel like I just kind of go off to sleep when I do it. So it's been so nice.
What's so interesting was when you started talking about the Tend to Your Talk meditation, I don't know if you noticed, but you slowed down. So yeah, exactly. And so it's also interesting because when I talk about mindful speaking and then the flip side, active listening to people, and part of that invitation includes being aware of the body as you're speaking or listening, people are just like, but wait, how can I then concentrate on what I'm saying or what the other person is saying? But it's so surprising how it could actually increase our presence and then increase our awareness. Otherwise, we're busy planning what we're going to say, and when we are actually talking, we're maybe concerned with how we sound or whatever, something like that. So yeah.
It's challenging, right? Because I want to take in everything you're saying, but I am. And I'm also thinking, oh, what am I going to ask next? Right. So it's bringing me back to just being here right now, talking with you. So it's interesting to see kind of this playing out. I want to mention one of my other favorite practices in the book that you share that I've been doing called Dig Doing the Dishes. Loving this one. I've been using it. Well, I'll actually let you tell us a little bit more about this one.
Oh, that one hits close to home, basically, because I just find nowadays with the increase of, like, say, audiobooks and media online, like podcasts and YouTube videos and all of this, it's easy to fill in these moments with intaking more media. And so, which can be really what's the word, seductive or appealing, because when we're doing something that we don't really like, of course, it's like a natural reaction to kind of want to be disembodied just to get it over with. And so Dig Doing the Dishes, at least for me, because I don't always enjoy doing the dishes, but it was really an invitation to be with all of the moments that are included in this task. So we might, again, kind of like pain, we might use this big label like do the dishes and then have a reaction to it. But when we kind of start unpacking the whole task, there are moments of pleasantness in there. Like, I don't know, the repetitive motion of moving the arms, or for me, it's about the water and feeling the suds on my skin. And so basically, it really just wakes us up to the moment, and how in any given moment, there can be unpleasant aspects to it, but also a lot of pleasant moments to it. And so it just really helps us see things in a more clear way, which is another way that insight is translated for insight meditation. It's this clear seeing, basically.
I love that. I think before that, I'm not sure where my mind was going during the dishes. Probably half the time I was wishing I wasn't doing them or thinking about what else I needed to get done. And actually, my husband is on this call who's joining us for the live episode, and he's probably thinking to himself, wait, I do the dishes. What is she talking about? But I love what you're saying, because there's so much going on, and we're thinking, oh, listening to another audiobook or a podcast, all these things are good, but then we're constantly taking in information. So we have actually, it seems like, well, we think we're doing self-improvement. We have less and less time for mindfulness unless we consciously carve out these times. Another reason I love the book, because it's not necessarily, well, you might have and make sure I'm getting this right. You might have your practice where you're like sitting down, maybe in a special space, but you can also do this in activities throughout your day.
Exactly. So a lot of folks, when they hear about meditation being another thing they might quote unquote need to do, they think, oh my gosh, like my morning routine is going to be 2 hours long with 15 minutes of meditation and then breathing exercises and stretches, but movement and this and that. So it can feel daunting. And so if we add something like, say, a 5-minute meditation practice, but then have these moments throughout the day, at the end of the day, it can easily add up to 15 or 20 minutes. And so to not underestimate all of these little moments, or what's sometimes called like all of these other doorways into the practice, they can be, like I said, quite powerful. And I think another kind of like misconception, once we learn what mindfulness is that the goal is to be mindful 100% of the time. And that is quite exhausting. And I don't really think, especially as people who are out and about in the world, that it's actually really possible. And the Pali, so to bring back that language of Buddhism, the Pali word that is often used to translate mindfulness is sati, S-A-T-I. But that word is also used to translate to remember. And so what I like to think, or what I love, is that it's kind of like to remember to be mindful, as opposed to be mindful no matter what kind of thing. And so all of these different ways that we can be mindful, like whether it's taking a shower, eating a cupcake, washing the dishes, whatever, are these moments of remembering, basically. And the more moments that we have, then the better we are for it, as opposed to going for one big chunk of time. But then when we don't, quote unquote, succeed, then we often fall into a spiral of berating ourselves or judgment or whatever. But I like to sometimes tell students, like, set the bar low so that anything you get above that bar is a cause for celebration, as opposed to setting it high and then consistently feeling like a failure or like you didn't achieve or something like that.
Well, that was one of my questions for you. How do we be mindful of being mindful, right? Like, how do we remember to do it? Or even if we practice it, then how do we bring it into what we're doing? I think you may have answered that, but anything else you want to say on that?
Yeah, and it's like also not like ancient or scientific, these approaches, but things like having Post-it notes all over the place, if your housemates allow for that kind of thing. Or you can choose like 1 or 2 activities that you completely commit to doing mindfully. So for example, I choose brushing my teeth, because at least that's 4 minutes of extra mindfulness a day. And I don't know, I just find brushing my teeth so tedious that I love to check emails or social media at that time. And so in those moments, I get to really lean into discomfort and impatience and FOMO, like wanting to do something else. So then that kind of helps to increase my resilience, so that when in life, because in Montreal, we're actually in our second and now extended lockdown. And so there's FOMO going on. And so, so it helps me in moments in my daily life, like outside of brushing my teeth. Another thing could be choosing one area of your home and tell yourself, okay, every time I walk through this place, I'm going to be mindful as best I can. So that could be like the hallway from your bedroom to the bathroom or something like that. And then I used to put timers on my phone, but those were easy to ignore. And so now what I do is I pair up with a friend and we will sometimes text each other, like stop or take a breath or check in with the heart and mind now. And we don't expect to reply to each other, but they're just these little reminders. And I'm more apt to listen to that mindful prompt, knowing that it's coming from a human that I care about, as opposed to this preset alarm that I made. But those are things that definitely help make it a habit, basically, in daily life.
I love this. These are just like little juicy tips, right? Because sometimes you hear about mindfulness and it's like about this big practice and it's kind of, all these things you can be doing or whatever it's about, it's theory. And like, this is like, oh, okay, this is how I do it. This is how I bring it into the day. These are super powerful little things that everybody can do. I want to switch gears a little bit because joining us today live for this recording are our holistic wellness coaches who are in the role of supporting and coaching clients. And, we also have other listeners who also are people who probably support, you have people you support in your lives, right? They're either professionally or personally. So in these cases, what can we look for in our clients that would indicate someone that might benefit from actually starting a mindfulness practice?
Yeah, that's a great question, because sometimes it's hard for us, or actually it can go both ways. Sometimes when we start practice, it's really easy for us to know who needs to practice. Or sometimes we get to know so well the ways it benefits us, and then we can see maybe through our clients the ways they may be suffering and then offer this practice up. But I would say, in particular, anybody who is feeling stressed, anxious, having a hard time sleeping, of course, but the way that it might show up in particular is when folks are particularly caught up in storylines. And what I mean by that is like something could be happening, like we're feeling sad or whatnot, but instead of addressing the sadness and dropping into the body in this mindful way, we're caught explaining the story over and over, or what is sometimes called in the practice, it's like adding the second arrow. So that's like adding the resistance that increases suffering. And that's kind of like, acknowledging that something is not working out in our life, but then after being like, but why me? And this shouldn't be happening to me. I don't deserve this. That person deserves it, etc. So I feel like that is maybe one of the most immediate ways that we can see how folks can benefit from this practice, from slowing down. And in the book, because one of the reasons why I offer 50 doorways into the practice is because, especially for those people who don't want to slow down or who almost can't because they just haven't slowed down for decades, the thought of them sitting and doing a meditation practice for 5 or 10 minutes can feel incredibly painful. And so that's why something like doing the dishes or going for a mindful hike or adding mindfulness to stretching, as opposed to playing that podcast or whatever, can be kind of doorways in before they can even start a more stationary or still meditation practice.
Stories. That sounds like such a good thing to kind of look for, right? Because I think we all have stories, and you're right. We can hear other people's stories that are kind of running on repeat, but it sounds like a great like little signal to us to be able to introduce it. And I'll say when I first became passionate about wellness, I would go out and tell everybody what they should be doing to be healthier, right? Much to the dismay of those who probably did not want my advice. So on that same note, how do we encourage others to incorporate a mindfulness practice when we see they could benefit without sounding like we're getting preachy or like I'm doing this and this is amazing? What are your thoughts on that?
It is so challenging. There's this saying in the practice community that says something like, "My family loves me when I'm a Buddha. They hate me when I'm a Buddhist." And so it's exactly that. And I totally got caught up in it too, because it has been incredibly powerful and transformative for me. And of course, I want the people that I love to also feel the certain lightness or freedom or not get so embroiled by external circumstances. But it's kind of like, I think of folks who smoke. My brother is a smoker. And so we've been through this cycle so many times in our lives where I want him to stop smoking. He says he wants to stop smoking, but only when he really wants to. That's when there's that opening for him to hear maybe some ways that mindfulness, for example, can help him. So I think one way that at least has helped me so far, although what's coming to mind right now is like, maybe I should actually ask the people who I'm not so close to anymore what has worked. But anyways, is to ask questions instead of going in for the kill and being like, oh, I have the solution for you. To be like, oh, and how does it feel? And are you looking for something to change? And what have you been trying? So to kind of like meet them where they're at, as opposed to, we might be friends, but then coming in as like then this expert or something like that. And I feel like it's mostly when people share with us, they're looking for connection first and foremost, before solutions. But we sometimes connect, especially as wellness experts, we connect through offering wellness solutions or tools. And so I like to try to focus first on the connection piece and then tune into if they feel open to suggestions and then offer some stuff. And when I do offer some things, I don't go ahead and prescribe them this whole meditation formula to do for the next 5 weeks. I'll say, oh, like, have you tried? And then maybe do like, leaving your phone at home when you go for a walk or something like that. So kind of like to tread lightly there too, and then to gauge their openness in that way as well.
I love that. It ties actually very closely into what we call the core coaching method here at the IAWP. Connection is the very first step, and it really is about being curious and listening before giving all of that advice. So it fits in so great with that. One of the things you mentioned in the book is that balance in mindfulness is not like balance in other things. Normally, we think we need to try harder to accomplish things. We've been talking a little bit about that. And I know you said that was kind of true with mindfulness. It's not about necessarily trying harder. That's kind of one of the myths along the path. Let's talk a little bit about other myths that people might have when it comes to thinking about starting a mindfulness practice.
I think the first thing that comes to mind, less so now, but certainly when I first started teaching meditation, especially in social settings, it would be weird when people would say like, what do you do? Which is a question we ask a lot. And when I would say that I teach meditation, I would get instantly met with resistance. Like, oh, my mind is too busy. That's not for me. And that's common, a common response I get. And it's common to have a busy mind. I have a busy mind. And I think that's one of the misconceptions. And so sometimes I playfully jab back and I might say, well, it's kind of like saying that you can't take a shower because you're too dirty. Mindfulness helps calm the mind just as a shower helps you wash off that dirt. And so that's like one of the things that comes to mind immediately. Another is I think that people expect or think that it needs to be really ideal in terms of a room that is like dark, that has a dimmer switch, that has a special shawl from a faraway Buddhist country, that has an organic buckwheat cushion or whatever, all of that. Although all of those things can help, they're not necessary in the sense that you might have all of those things, but then there's like a fly in the room or like a pain in the knee or an itch on the part of your back you can't reach or something like that. So all this to say is I think that this practice cultivates a tolerance for discomfort. And so we might not get the heating right. We might not have those fluffy socks, but we can still practice in the midst of all of that. So we don't really need that that ideal environment.
I love that you shared that. You don't really need any special tools. You don't need all these things. They might be nice, but you can actually get started today. Dawn, I know you have offered to lead us through a short mindfulness exercise. Is that something we can do now?
Yeah, okay. I'm so happy to share this with you.
Okay.
And so it might be, let's say 3 minutes, 4 minutes or so. You don't need to change your posture. You only need access to the audio. So you could turn away from the computer if you like. You could even step away from the computer. For those of you listening to this later, if you're driving, please pull over or do this later. Or if you're walking or in movement, do this later. And once you've settled into whatever posture you're choosing, turn your eyes downwards or close the eyes, whatever you're comfortable with. Then take 1 or 2 deep breaths to help you ground a little bit more fully into the body or into this moment. And if your eyes are closed, it could also be done with the eyes slightly open. Relax your eyes. Imagine that the eyeballs are heavy and they're sinking down into the sockets, but even away from your eyelids. And now just observe whatever might be attracting your attention right now. It could be some sounds or a sensation. It could even be a thought like, am I doing this right? Perhaps it's a feeling. And we'll be here for about 30 seconds or a minute. And so whatever you're observing will most likely change as time goes on. And as best you can, just follow the mind, landing on whatever it's being attracted to right now. In a moment, I'll ring the bell. And just in case you throw your eyes open at the sound of the bell, try to take in the sound completely in and maybe even following the sound fade into silence. If your eyes are closed or turned downwards, gently blink them open. And welcome back to this moment. And so just to give a little bit of context for what we did, it's a meditation that's actually in the book. It's one of the first ones. And it follows the acronym STOP. Stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. And the thing is, this could be done in as little as 20 seconds, or we did it over a few minutes. But just notice how the presence or your presence might have shifted. Maybe not by a lot, but it might feel different than it did a few minutes ago. And that's the power of just stopping and being present. And I like to do that practice, particularly when I'm in a period of answering a bunch of emails, because I don't enjoy that. And so it often helps me to be nicer in the emails that follow, or to be maybe a little bit more patient, or add in a few like, how are you? Instead of getting to the meat of that email. So, yeah.
Right now I'm thinking, well, hey guys, what do you want to talk about next? That was so powerful. That was so nice. Thank you for leading us through that. And I love how it's something you can do in just a few moments time. And let's shift gears once again. We're going to go to our talkback time now. This is where our holistic wellness coaches are joining us live. They're going to be asking some of our questions. So let's go ahead and open up live. Now is a great time if you're out there to raise your hand. If you have a question, love for you to connect with Dawn and ask a question, or also to share with us any reflections or insights that you gained today, or any breakthroughs, or even something you're going to try and do next.
In the meantime, there's a comment in the chat about the mind wandering. So I saw that Deborah wrote, I love it, but you're right. It's hard not to let your mind wander. And so in the teachings of mindfulness meditation and Buddhist meditation, and this is described in another one of the meditations in my book, we don't have 5 senses that we learn in school. We have 6 senses, and the mind thinking is another one of those senses. And so just as much as, for example, if we have the capacity or the ability to hear, just as much as it might be weird to say like, well, okay, for 10 minutes a day, just stop hearing. It's like, we can't really, because we have that ability. And so yet, despite we do that, we apply that same pressure to the mind. It's like, okay, I'm going to meditate, so I'm going to try to stop thinking for 10 minutes. And it's not about that. It's kind of like just with sounds will come and go, thoughts will come and go. And it's, can we not get so caught up in them, basically?
I see Susan has shared that she's going to try mindfulness when folding the laundry today.
Yeah.
That sounds like another good one.
Yeah, that's a good one. I should try that. Instead, what I do not so mindfully is I tell my partner to fold the laundry. I'll try that.
That could be done mindfully. I'm with you on that, Dawn.
I know. I just don't often do it mindfully. I'll be like, didn't you hear the dryer?
Oh, anybody want to ask a live question? Now's the time. Go ahead. Just raise your hand. We'll give you a mic if you're on video, or if you're on audio, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself. I've got so many people on. I got to go through a couple of different screens to make sure I can see if you're raising your hand out there. I see Sarah is raising her hand. Let me give you a microphone. Hi, Sarah.
Hi there. I just wondered if any of your other students, I tend to often cry actually at the end of a practice, and I didn't know if that was my own unique way of releasing, or if you find that to be common amongst your students.
It's certainly common. And this practice, even though we approach it, especially in the modern world, we approach this practice as a way to help address, say, like pain or discomfort, etc. It's actually considered a purification practice, because it's like once we sit or lie down and we get still and we try to be mindful, what's happening is we're giving space for all of this, what one of my teachers, Jack Kornfield, says, the unfinished business of the heart. And so that will arise, whether it arises in a very clear way, like a specific storyline, or maybe a felt sense. And so in that purification process, it comes out in different ways. And so for you, you might be experiencing it as tears for now. And it might not always be the case that you'll cry at the end of every meditation. It could shift. For others, it could be more like a physical release in terms of, say, heat. For others, emotional as well. So there are many ways that it could get released. And then even energetic, we might feel like a buzzing in the body too. So that's possible as well. Yeah, thanks for that, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Thanks for sharing, Sarah. Anyone else out there want to ask a question or share what you might try next? We're a little bit quiet today, and maybe just mindful and introspective, which is fine. This has been so great being here with you, Dawn. And I just want to say, as we end the interview, kind of part of our episode today, I want to share this quote from Dawn that you shared in your book. It just feels so powerful right now. You say, "This precious human life is made up of precious human days and precious human moments. How we spend them is important. How we spend our time, how we live together, and most importantly, how we treat ourselves and each other. And mindfulness teaches us that what we do doesn't matter as much as how we do it." Thank you for that. I loved that. And I think it's just beautiful to carry with us.
Yeah, especially now and for the weeks and of course months to come, given all of the unknown that we're facing as humanity, regardless of where we're located.
Thank you for the quote. Thank you for your book. And most of all, thank you for being here today with our community to share your wisdom, Dawn. I'm just so grateful that you took the time to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much again. And I really hope that this can be of benefit for those listening and all of the people that you serve, whether it's the folks in your life, in your community, or the clients that you see as well.
Thank you, Dawn. And I want to thank everybody for listening to today's episode. I'm grateful to have been here with Dawn and with all of you. Take care, everybody. Bye. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Live Well, Dream Big. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and I want to invite you to take your next step toward living well and dreaming big by downloading the Live Well, Dream Big lifestyle book. It's the ultimate guide to becoming your best self and living life on your own terms. You can grab your complimentary copy by going to the link in the show notes or heading directly to iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide. That's iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide.